Hey there, and welcome to Up Next in Commerce. I'm your host, Stephanie Postles, CEO of Mission.org. And today I was excited to talk new school ideas with a long-standing company that has seen it all. And to do just that, we brought Jennifer Elmashni on the show, who serves as the Vice President of Global E-commerce and Digital Marketing at BIC International. You know, the company that was founded in 1945 and is known for their pens, lighters, and razors. On today's episode, Jennifer breaks down how the global brand is building community, engaging in B2B and D2C strategies, and what it looks like to experiment anywhere and everywhere in order to stay on top. Plus, we even went international in this episode and explore what other countries are doing when it comes to leveraging influencers and how they're figuring out scrappy ways to scale last mile delivery. So grab your favorite pen and take notes because this one was a fun one. Before we jump into the interview, I want to give a quick shout out to our partners, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, who help make this podcast possible. You can learn more about Salesforce Commerce Cloud by visiting salesforce.com/commerce. All right, let's jump into it. Jennifer, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, same. So I would love to actually kind of start with your background. You have an amazing, awesome, windy journey that I was looking through on LinkedIn, and you've done a lot. And I was hoping we could maybe start back in your Walmart days, because to me, that was like the point of inflection of, jumping into your e-commerce journey. And I thought that'd be a great starting point.
Yes, happy to do that. And, it's interesting reflecting on starting my journey in e-commerce almost, 12 years ago now. Seems like eons ago. And so much has evolved and changed. But even back then, it felt like things were progressing and so far ahead of its time. So I was in management consulting for several years, and my first sort of internal industry role was in San Francisco with Walmart.com. I was part of a global e-commerce business development team. And our mission was to take the internal platform and capability at Walmart and scale the DTC business for other areas around the globe, but then also test new pilots. And so it was part of the original first in the US online grocery delivery pilot,
Wow.
which now Walmart
Yeah.
grocery, online pickup, in-store pickup, home delivery is such a big part of their model. But it was out of San Jose, California, and it was a pretty incredible experience in trying to navigate the technology of placing your order online, sort of the fulfillment of grocery, pick, pack experience, training all of the store associates as part of the pilot and the delivery truck drivers. Meanwhile, getting, everything in a seamless experience to the end shopper. So that was really fun. And, at that point, I learned that I loved all things digital, and I loved the complexity of a true sort of that in-store online omnichannel experience. And I from there went to a startup in San Francisco. It was BloomSpot. Their mission, they were in the daily deal space. So at the time, Groupon, Living Social, Guild Group were all becoming very large platforms and experiences, and flash sale, getting exciting experiences at a discounted rate for a very short amount of time. And so BloomSpot was playing in that luxury experience space. It's where I sort of cut my teeth in digital marketing arena, also product development. I officially was going in as a director of learning and development to help grow the organization. But in a startup environment, you're wearing multiple hats. Unfortunately, that was short-lived. Company was acquired, and many of us had the opportunity to move on to other things, which comes
such as Silicon Valley.
Yeah, but it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. That it brought me to J&J. So I started in J&J in California, eventually moved to the consumer sector where I led North America e-commerce business, and being in a region role, learning the ins and outs of retail, working with all of our US customers, but at the same time building this muscle with one of J&J's largest regions was really fun, hard, really tough. To help build things that were new muscles for a very large established healthcare organization. But it was a lot of fun. And And the opportunity with BIC came along to do that, but at global scale, and really help the organization, which is where I'm at now. I lead our Global Center of Excellence for e-commerce and digital marketing. Our BIC has big ambitions to accelerate e-commerce, like many organizations, even before COVID hit its peak, and building the strategy, the infrastructure, the people capabilities, relationships with new channels in the e-commerce realm are all things that are part of our mission here.
Wow, cool. So it's interesting listening to your journey, and you can tell there's this level of excitement and loving the challenge to every part of it where, some people could have gotten burned out in those early Walmart days trying to figure out, grocery and online. And it's really fun hearing the excitement behind your voice of like taking on the hard challenges and try to figure things out. Where do you think that stems from? Like, where do you get this level of energy from?
What's funny, if you were to ask me what my superpower is, I always say the ability to have unlimited amount of energy. So,
Oh, well, I like that. How do
uh,
you have it? I want to know the secrets.
yeah, I think naturally. I mean, if you were to ask my mother, I mean, she would say, "Well, this is exactly what how you've always been." I think for me, it's always this. I have fallen and continue to have this passion for e-commerce. It's an area that always presents and reminds you there's never a truly right answer. And just
Yeah.
when you think you've solved it and figured it out, something else has changed and evolved. And I think being in this industry for over 10 years, you sort of grow this affinity, an
Hmm.
addiction to this ever evolving change.
Yep.
And even if you've been in a particular role or with an organization in this area, there's everything around you that's constantly changing. So
Yeah.
someone like myself who's a bit of an adrenaline junkie, it's a good
So,
place to be.
I mean, that's perfect place. You're in the perfect role then. Do you feel like you can, yeah, just kind of see things that are coming like down the line? Like what things are maybe you prepping for when it comes to the world of e-commerce? I mean, I know you have a lot of things you're working on at BIC, and I see the big shifts to online and, the marketing changing because of that. And like, what are you kind of prepping for right now or preparing for that maybe others aren't, or like other companies aren't really like thinking about or expecting yet?
Yes, it's a great question. Maybe I'll start with where did we need to start to be able to get to a place of
Yeah.
anticipation? Because I think it's a really important part of any organization's journey. And then I've experienced, doing this in a different context, different companies that unless you have the fundamentals set up and an
Hmm.
infrastructure that's set up, it's really difficult to sort of progress to the next, um,
Yeah.
being ahead in the next part of the journey. And so, the last few years at BIC here, it's really been about flawless digital shelf and what does it take to deliver that. And we're now at a place where, anticipating to me, delivery and speed are going to be the
Hmm.
areas that are going to progress faster than any other. Retailer capabilities are evolving. If you think about the options that are available, consumer demand is getting higher and higher. It's now has always been an expectation, but it's almost now a standard to be that flexible. And shoppers want what they want when they want it and how they want it.
Hmm.
So our ability here at BIC is going to come on the downstream end of how do we show up and meet those needs, keeping up with evolving platforms, partnering really closely with our customers, but then also, exploring and testing. There's a lot of new technologies out there as well that'll allow us to connect in with consumers in unique ways that we're always trying to test.
Okay, so I want to hear about these new technologies. What are you trying out? What's most exciting when it comes to connecting with the consumers in a different way?
Yeah, I'll and shout out to my partners at Vesta who have been, in the consumer promotional shopper type of arena, but we're partnering with them. We launched a education driven community
Mhm.
called Because We Care. And it,
Like it.
it started with how can we tie in gamification, a purpose to bring like-minded or really passionate people. It's a US pilot to start.
Mhm.
And sort of the lens of education, which we know with COVID is flipped everything on its head. So how can we serve a role as BIC with stationary education is a really big segment that we're really have deep roots in.
Mhm.
So we partnered up with Vesta, launched this community. We started with nobody. We now in 3 months have more than 5,000 opted-in members who are feeding community groups. They're taking on missions and challenges. We use badges and points to engage the community. And it's through this platform, we're also able to garner a level of analytics, zero party data, which is also
Mm.
equally fascinating to be able
Yep.
to really understand this audience that we're drawing in and how they're engaging with each other. So from a marketing perspective, it's using technology in these digital avenues, but to also learn a lot about the dynamics from an education standpoint.
Oh, that's cool. So everyone wants to develop a community, of course, but it's very hard to do. It's very hard to keep people engaged. I mean, even getting them there in the first place is a feat, and then keeping them in there and like engaging with it is a whole nother beast. What were some lessons when you guys were thinking about developing this? And I mean, it sounds like you're very much gamifying certain aspects of it to keep them engaged. What were some lessons, either great lessons or ones where you're like, that was kind of a flop. It didn't really work out well when it came to building this community?
That's a great question. And actually one that I had a hypothesis and probably a little bit of a self-fulfilling. If so I have a 7-year-old son, Mazen, and a 4-year-old daughter, Leilani. Leilani is in daycare. My son is in second grade. And as a mom who's navigating, especially in a hybrid, remote, now back in
Mhm.
school environment, that I'm constantly wanting to help the community. And I assumed that the draw of that sort of passion would be the priority of drawing folks into the community.
Mhm.
Human nature and psychology, I learned that you have to have some sort of reward system to draw people in. That's what we've
Yep.
found has been the number one acquisition lever, has been having some sort of, whether it's through points or even special surprise and delight big swag bags, that
Mhm.
these are things that I probably didn't realize as much, that having that little extra kicker is what
Yep.
get folks to not just look, but also fully opt in and engage in the community. So
Mhm.
that's one. Another that I didn't anticipate to be as big as what it's turned out to be, is the nature of this type of community that,
Mhm.
and I think about it too. You have Facebook groups or other community groups that you have this affinity to, that folks look at it as a place to have each other's backs. So this
Mhm.
arena of sort of mental health and having a safe group to talk through different challenges and offer perspective. That's another arena that I didn't, more an internal lens and focus versus, working directly with your school. So
Mhm.
they're
Oh,
learn.
those are 2 great ones. So after I mean, this community is already growing pretty quickly. It sounds like it's going well. How do you plan on interacting from a big perspective? Like, from a company perspective, where do you wanna play in that engagement, and how much are you kind of letting the community run on its own versus being like, "But we have, like, metrics here, people. We need to get some ROI on this community." Like, what are your goals around it?
Yes, and this one is so tough in the priority, which is a tough one. I very much wear a commercial leadership hat, so
Mhm.
the KPIs and the ROI is,
Yeah, same.
closely lingering as a high second priority.
Yeah.
Um, in this an initial, 6 months, it was really important to invest in learning on what creates the tipping point and the snowball effect, and
Mhm.
what are those things, and from there start to shape and push where's Vic's role as a voice in the community. And so what we've learned, and naturally, we haven't had a distinct direct voice, so to say. We manage the community and present challenges and questions, but I think the reward and also recognizing that school supplies and having a place there to offer the community as sort of rewards for engagement have been an area where commercially started to, uh,
Mhm.
you know, weave that in. But it
Yep.
is a balance when the focus is, more of a purpose-driven philanthropic sort of mission.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So thinking about, the roller coaster of the world and where people, one moment they're buying all the school supplies probably in person and they're needing all the ready materials and then probably it decreasing quite a bit. And now I'm guessing it's coming back. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but like just recently I've started thinking, oh, I need to get some pens and paper again. I should get a notebook. Like all the things I haven't maybe thought about for a year or so. How have you all thought about shifting? I mean, what have you had to do behind the scenes to shift that marketing message and attract customers in different ways where maybe, like me, it's an impulse purchase, like, oh, yeah, I need some pens while I'm here. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea to grab a notebook to then shifting the customer journey in a way that, is actually having to probably remind me that, like, you might need this in the future. And how do you make, have you had to change the marketing and the customer journey throughout this past few years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's become an and more inclusive
Hmm.
type of approach. And the learnings came from when everything was on lockdown and shut down. And I'll take an example of the more focus on in-home type of experiences and now recognizing that the in-store experiences are going to be open, that understanding first and foremost, who and where does our audience engage? And
Hmm.
recognizing how much the world of social has exploded as a result of, being home more and, just several ways to engage that's become a bigger shift. It's always represented a significant portion of how we go to market in terms of channels, media channels, but also from a creative, being dynamic and optimizing based on those channels has been a really important strategy.
Hmm.
Taking the learnings of what's worked in the period of time where the in-home, whether it's school or, the B2B channel is a very big one. Office products is a large segment for
Yeah.
us, for our stationery business. And recognizing much of that has also shifted to an online purchase experience. And so all of these things have taught us we have to be nimble and flexible in where we're investing from a digital media perspective to reach and engage. Having flexible and optimized content based on those channels, and also taking the nuances from an e-commerce standpoint, even if the point of purchase happens in a physical space, just being there at all of those points in the journey is sort of
Hmm.
at the end of the day the most important piece. So we can't just be all shifting to e-commerce, but constantly thinking with an omni-channel, both the in-store and offline type of activations and experiences.
Yeah. I'm guessing the relationship with your, B2B customers has changed quite a bit. I mean, have you had to find new ways of re-engaging them after this time period where they're probably still coming up for air trying to figure out what is this world and, should I have a retail store? And I mean, from everyone that I've heard on the show, the answer is yes. It just might have to be a bit different. But like, have you had to, yeah, just re-engage them in maybe ways you never have had to before?
Oh, absolutely. And, our commercial organization, and this is really across the globe, the role that BIC has been able to play in helping our business to business customers elevate their own ways of reaching the end business consumer, the end, decision maker in a more digital enabled way. So
Hmm.
might not be through a human touch or a representative or a phone call, that it may have to go through an online portal um, to shop the catalog, understand your choices, and make a decision that these are things. And even helping to build that muscle has been one that I know the teams have really seen a place that BIC has been able to help.
Yeah. I mean, you get a really interesting view, I'm sure, into the global markets and being able to see, oh, this is like, what this one country is trying out. And I'm sure things are very interesting from the viewpoint that you get. Are there any particular places that you're watching that just are very interesting, maybe how they're shifting their shopping or how retailers are offering things, or just something that's interesting in general when it comes to like a global perspective of, retail shopping?
Oh, absolutely. I will always forever keep my eye in Latin America,
Yeah.
Brazil, Mexico in
Hmm.
particular. It's fascinating how developing markets, when you compare to a US, a China, a Japan, or a UK type of environment, that you have these emerging, um, booming e-commerce, fast growing areas that maybe the infrastructure still has to catch up, but the level of creativity and innovation that's coming. So, for example, social strategies, digital strategies that I often see come through the Latin America markets is
Mm.
fascinating. Yeah,
Wow. Okay. Do you have any examples? I want to hear what are they doing over there?
yes, I mean, and this might be one that I just haven't seen brands do in the US, so that I sit here in Connecticut, that using sort of digital influencers, meaning they're avatar characters who are almost like cartoon-esque
Mm.
influencers. They're not real, but they are very much have a following and act as real human influencers. And so
Wow.
this
I haven't seen that
this has
actually.
become a really big craze, and even in any channel, TikTok,
Hmm.
Instagram, that the following of these digital, literal digital influencers is picking up a lot of momentum. And so it's just so creative in how that's kind of flipping digital on its side a bit. So that's one
Yeah.
recent
Wow.
encounter from our Brazil team that was a fan fave of mine.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, that's like a whole different idea around scaling influencers. Imagine like one person having 20 digital influencers that they could just set free and
Yeah.
yeah, have working for them. I mean, that's a different type of thinking, which is very interesting. I mean, those markets are always fun to watch because I mean, you've just seen them. I think it's called like the leapfrog effect or something where basically they just hop over technologies that, they're like, oh, point of sale systems, never had it, don't need it anymore. And they just skip over and I can definitely see that happening, in the world of e-commerce where maybe even things that we're trying to figure out right now, they're just going to hop right over it and not even worry about it because the technology is moving so quickly. Are there
Right.
any examples where you're like, I see them, maybe doing checkout in a different way or finding things in a different way where it's completely leapfrogging the technology we're focused on here in the US, like tunnel vision?
Yes, and maybe not from I'll put it in the technology camp, but also in really the fast fulfillment model that markets like India, markets
Mhm.
that are Spain, Italy, that are very have areas that are metropolitan and can be dense. Even in South Africa, that
Mhm.
the rise of the last mile delivery partners, the Instacarts of the world, but at much smaller scale, but several options I see emerging, and it's really taking advantage of if the infrastructure in that particular area isn't fully set up for these sophisticated 10, 7 day, 1 day, 2 day delivery
Yeah.
windows. How do you use feet on the street to get a product safely from point A to point B in
Mhm.
10 minutes? But these are the
Yeah.
things that I see pop up much more frequently in new players than we probably would have seen come to life in a market like the US.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like many of them are taking on this decentralized approach where, companies here are a little bit more like, oh no, it has to be the trained driver who's like within our network. And I see these, other countries being like, whoever can deliver it, best of luck, let's get it there. But it's very decentralized in the way that they're thinking. And it seems like it has the chance to scale up much more quickly because of that approach. I mean, I'm sure there's downsides to it too, but yeah, super interesting.
Yeah. And from a big, exactly to your point, wearing a global hat and having to make choices. So, in order to get anything with global scale, and I mentioned before the importance of the fundamentals and the foundation, but still leaving room for, if you have 2 or 3 priorities or everyone is moving down the same path, leaving one pillar there and a little bit of room for these exploratories, because that's also
Mhm.
the only way that we're going to put ourselves out there and see what might stick, even if it's very small, even if it can't scale. The
Yep.
importance of flexing that muscle and testing, you could find a diamond in the rough that you would have never known that that could be a special unlock for, an organization like BIC. So I am a big believer
Yeah.
in saving that 10-20% of your time for um, really kind of far out there tests.
Yep.
Try.
Yeah. Back in when I was working at Google, we had the same mentality, the 20% of spend your time doing something like not focused on your current project and get you thinking either in a different, vertical or team or whatever it might be. And it was very fun watching the things that would come out of these 20% projects. And, many of them turned into like very large business units within Google. And it was very impressive of like what one person could do, even though most of the time they called it 120% time because they're like, you still just have to work 100% of your job. This is like the extra 20 on top of it when you're at home.
Oh, yes.
But regardless, cool things came out of it.
I don't know if we're that far behind the Google factor.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any, like, what are some projects right now that you have in that maybe, 10, 20% bucket that you all are experimenting with that you're super excited about, but you don't know if it's, going to work out?
Yes, our Because We Care community is one, and one that I wouldn't put it in the we don't know if it's going to work out, because I knew it would work out, but it just was showing that in one market, and now we're starting to do it in more markets. So also shout out to Rachel Tipograph and the Micmac crew. As an example of the rise of social commerce, shortening the
Mhm.
natural shortening of the idea of a funnel, which really there is no funnel when it comes to, you have to capture the attention in a nanosecond, in any digital, form or channel. And how do you draw them into the brand in a really authentic way? Make a choice on the spot
Yep.
to add to cart and choose. And so we've learned a lot by partnering with Micmac in our US business with, segments that we were really trying to get off the ground quite quickly. So our body mark business, which was relatively new, it's in the creative skin, temporary tattoo marking
Oh.
arena, which, if you think about the tradition of maybe what
Mhm.
BIC comes top of mind, that um, using technology such as Micmac that allows us to plug in and engage and serve it, the end-to-end offering right when a consumer is just exploring and engaging is an example of trying to take something new and bring it top of mind, but also pull our
Mm.
consumers to trial quite quickly.
Oh, that's great. So that kind of brings me to the next topic I wanted to dive into, and it was around how you all are thinking about branded content and integrating your products into, TV shows or series. I know I saw you all did something with Disney, and it was to highlight, the cool things that you could do, with your products, but it seemed very organic. And I wanted to hear, like, one, how did that do for you when you partnered with Disney on that? And then also, do you plan on doing more? Is that an angle that you think is big for the future?
Oh, absolutely. I think really the relevancy and authenticity are the two things that have to come together brilliantly with any partner that any brand I think connects with. Uh, and the thing that I love about, you know, from a content perspective, it's being very thoughtful but deliberate about how you introduce the brand. And so I I will say that I have a bias. I would say my major and minor, that my major hat is really e-commerce and the minor
Mhm.
is, in the marketing arena.
Yeah.
And so, and bias in the e-commerce sales side. So I've had to learn the journey of how do you do it in a way that builds the brand, and makes it clear that the big brand is the contributor to whatever the story that we're trying to tell, and
Yep.
at the same time make the hero about the story, so
Mhm.
that it's truly engaging. And so The other piece that I recognize, particularly in a digital channel, you have a very short window to catch someone's attention. I mean, I
Mhm.
joke about a nanosecond, but that truly is how much time you have. And so if you only have that amount of time, you have to present the brand early and often in order to make sure that you find that right balance. And so uh, I'm a big fan also of testing and
Mhm.
optimizing very, very quickly. It's the great thing about being able to swap in, swap out as you're optimizing campaigns with variety of content that either resonates or doesn't. So
Yeah.
it's a big part of it too.
Yeah, I always am thinking about, the connection between marketing and then sales in the world of e-commerce and how to bring all those movements together. I mean, how have you like what best practices do you have when it comes to connecting the dots on all those things and understanding where the sales coming from and if, the marketing material performed within the first 2 seconds well and how it, contributed to sales wherever those sales happen? Like what have you had to do to get all that in place to be able to actually have enough insight to make decisions?
Yes, I would say this is the integrated the insight and data gathering has been the trickiest nut to crack.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, in any organization, it is a lot of work, but work that pays off. It's starting, a bit manual. You have to pull
Mhm.
from. We have a social listening capability that allows us to hear what's the chatter from consumers and even shoppers through ratings and reviews. We do have a DTC platform in the US, UK, and France. How can we look at how our consumers are engaging on those platforms? And then we have, sort of digital media campaigns that's another level of insight that come in these, for our largest campaigns. And then the power of whatever we can extract, although it can be limited from our e-commerce third party platform. So how can we take the learnings through Vendor Central on Amazon and start to piece the story together? It's the piecing part I know can be pretty painful. Uh,
Yeah.
but if you take, you know, hypotheses that you have and isolated instances, it's pretty fascinating what you can start to draw in terms of conclusions. So, and it can't be over engineering it. So our digital shelf framework that we have here at BIC is called SPARK, which stands for Search, Price, Assortment, Ratings, and Reviews and Content. That's our framework. That's our fundamental. That's our foundation. We are always sort of dissecting the Spark to sales arena. And within Spark, you have which channels to go after, what's your content strategy, and always looking at the downstream of making these choices. What does that do to
Mhm.
our sales picture? And so
Yeah.
that's a really focus area that we're trying to constantly piece together.
Yeah, I hear that from every company almost. That's the hardest piece to tackle as the world, evolves so quickly and all of a sudden there's all these platforms and everything's omni-channel now and yeah, just how to actually connect the dots between what you're even doing in the, the marketing side and um I think it'll get solved though. Over the coming years, I am very
Um,
bullish on where this world's headed and the technology that's backing these processes.
I place my bets on the same table that you're headed.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite e-commerce tools or something within your tech stack that you're like, oh, this is a game changer. If you have this, you can do everything. Like anything that's a favorite or a couple favorites.
Yes, I would say these are having a digital shelf tracking um, and insights deriving mechanism has been really it's one thing to sort of release a framework, but being able to really understand how we're doing against that flawless digital shelf at global scale and having a common
Mm.
language, that's been one arena
Yeah.
that's been pretty powerful. Then what I've learned at the same time in doing something that's of that scale,
Mm.
we look at 16 different countries. We have over 70 platforms that we're monitoring and scraping. The no tool is perfect, but having an anchor and a base to be able to look at the digital shelf has been really powerful.
Hmm.
The second has been sort of our content operational capabilities. So having a global PIM and a global product information management capability, as well as a global digital asset library, combined together has sort of been the third wheel in the digital shelf operations arena that
Mhm.
has been really pretty powerful.
Cool. I love it. So what are you most excited about over the next couple years? And it can be personal, it can be within BIC, it can be within the world of e-commerce, wherever you want to take it. But I just want to hear, what is Jennifer most excited about?
Ooh, yes. I think for me, I'm constantly fascinated about what emerges that engages sort of the future. So I'll share a story about my 7-year-old son, Mazen, who he is my test bunny for everything. My husband and I got him a cell phone when he was 5. I'm sure a lot of parents are probably judging me right now, but I look at it as like an experiment for
Yeah.
work. And he doesn't have a cell phone number, but he is Wi-Fi enabled. So I watch him, and even, fast forward 2 years later, he always had an iPad, but the mobile device was one. He's completely obsessed with Roblox. And
Yeah. As is every kid.
right, that these, the metaverse and seeing
Hmm.
what from a shopping experience standpoint, he got a Robux card from his grandparents to buy things, pets in
Yep.
Roblox. And he wanted to, fancy up his avatar and bought a Chanel shirt for
Oh my
like
gosh.
1,000. I don't even know what the
Yeah.
money denomination is but those are the things that I get excited. Now, it's a little scary if you think about
Hmm.
that, but
Yeah.
it is really fascinating what access and experiences our future generations are going to have that we never would have imagined. And so
Yeah.
I'm pretty pumped to see what's going to come.
Yeah, I mean, I find it interesting and an opportunity that maybe isn't taken up on enough of like studying what like your kid is doing like at age 7 or 14. And I feel like there's a lot going on. And I mean, I keep hearing Roblox popping up over and over. And this is a world that I know nothing about. I mean, I think we did just have their CIO on one of our other podcasts. But I mean, it's a good point in like how do we study what this younger generation is doing? Because even on the last, I just had an interview right before this one and with Sweetwater, and he was just saying like we really are trying to figure out what the younger generation is doing and how to get in front of them, and connecting with them is so vastly different than who our current customer profile is. And I heard it from Slumberland Furniture too. She was saying the same thing. Like we have an older demographic of customers and we have to shift to the newer ones. How do you think brands should be studying this and playing in this field? And this can be outside of BIC, but like how should they be studying this and trying things out to see what works? Because I do feel like there's going to be this wave where all of a sudden it's a whole different demographic who pops up. They finally have purchasing power. They're able to get the things that they want. And it seems like right now, like we don't understand them very well. And yes, I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a learn by doing. I've always been a
Mhm.
learn by doing type of person. And so I do think for any brand or business, immersing yourself to the extent that you can in that environment. And it's interesting that I'm sure many parents will keep rolling with this, with my son and his kind of digital connectivity, that I wanted him to show us how he's experiencing this very naturally. Whereas I have to also respect that, I think a lot of folks there should be boundaries for civic. He's
Yes.
got a lot of boundaries, but this is one that, when sort of left to your own devices and being in exploration mode, you can pick up on such fascinating and see the future right before your eyes. And so that's one isolated experience,
Hmm.
but almost getting hands on and trying versus here you have an agency come and share a beautiful
Yeah.
presentation with all the insights and analytics to make a choice. Sometimes
Hmm.
if you see and experience something directly yourself or through your target audience, it's saving a little bit of grace and investment to just go try with not low expectations, but the start small type of
Yep.
mindset. Because again, that 20% gem in diving in the
Hmm.
rough, that unless you just tinker a little bit, you'll never really know what,
Yeah.
because you can't until you didn't experience it yourself. Like you
Yep.
said, and I couldn't play Roblox for the life of me.
Yeah. Man. I mean, that's such a great point. I love hearing that. It reminds me of I was talking with one of my friends who builds NFTs, and she's like in some gaming thing where you make money within the game and all these things. She kept explaining it to me, and I was like, oh, I don't know what you're really talking about. She's like, just get in there with me. Like, you can just build an NFT with me. We can do it together. And I was like, oh, that would actually be way easier than you telling me all the logic behind it and how it's hooked up. Like, I'll just do it and
That's
I'll
a
understand.
perfect example. That is a perfect example.
Yeah, love that. Well, Jen, this has been a wonderful interview. I've really loved having you on the show. Super fun. I've loved your energy, as you already know. So thank you for coming on and being a great guest. Where can people learn more about what you're up to and what BIC is up to?
Yes, well, LinkedIn is the best place to stay connected. So, please follow along Jennifer Elmashni in LinkedIn, but also follow our BIC social channel on our BIC handle on LinkedIn. That we're doing so many fantastic things. Follow us on Instagram as well. And please also share ideas. I mean, I get pings and messages and all the time that I'm constantly exploring and see what others are doing. So I encourage others to share your learnings too.
If you're looking for the #1 platform for all things commerce, there's no better choice. So definitely go check it out at salesforce.com/commerce.